Yeah, I think I'm good.
Okay.
All
You
right, I
ready?
got tilted good here. Let's see. There we go.
All
All right,
right.
Sky. Let's do this, man. Thanks
Let's
for
do
having
it,
me
brother.
on.
Okay. So just with looking at the first week one, right? And you're looking at CBS's slate of games. What jumps out to you? What game is a must-see game, do you think, in that first week?
I'm shocked at how good the games are for the week one schedule on CBS. We normally, most years, we have a single header, what we call a regional game. This year, it's a doubleheader, and there are 3 or 4 games that I think were good enough to be a national doubleheader. The main game that's going to go to the great majority of the country, the most seen game of the opening weekend, will be our Cleveland at Kansas City game. That's the game that Tony Romo and Tracy Wolfson and I will be calling. That jumps off the page because that was a divisional playoff game that really came down to the last minute last year. You might recall that Patrick Mahomes got injured in the game, suffered a concussion. Chad Henne had to come in. Andy Reid rolled the dice and went for it on a 4th down play near midfield. Late in the game, had they failed to convert, Cleveland would have had a short field with a chance to win at Arrowhead. But Andy, with his bold play, it paid off, and Kansas City was able to advance and eventually go on and win the AFC Championship game. So that's a big game. But also on the CBS schedule that day, Pittsburgh is at Buffalo. It's a gigantic game. That's been a primetime game the last couple of years. It'll be our anchor game at 1 o'clock. It's huge. Also that day, you're going to have the Jets at Carolina. You're going to have presumably Zach Wilson against Sam Darnold going against his old teammate. I would want to see that. And then, of course, you've got Miami at New England for the 2nd straight year. The Dolphins have to travel to Gillette to take on the Patriots. And we don't know, of course, exactly what the game's going to look like from the New England side. I assume it'll be Cam Newton at quarterback. But the Dolphins have been they've been full of draft capital for a couple of years. They're loaded, and that's going to be a whale of a game.
And if you get Mac starting in that game, you could have 2 former Bama quarterbacks going against each other, right?
Yeah, the 2 guys that really held down the position the last 5 years at Alabama, been playing in the championship game every year between the 2 of them, and that is the future for both of those franchises. And yeah, it's a nice, sexy matchup. New England and Miami with Tua and Mac Jones potentially meeting there. But the story week one for us is it's a doubleheader game, and we have Cleveland at Kansas City. It's a huge game. We all know that the Browns made a gigantic upgrade last year with their personnel, their roster, their results. They made it to the playoffs. They won in Pittsburgh in the wild card round, and they very nearly won at Kansas City. And, the Chiefs will be the favorite on the AFC side, but Cleveland's going to be most people's top 5 in the AFC. I can't even imagine anybody having any worse than top 5. So that's a big matchup for us to open up our season.
And we talk about storylines here. Perhaps the biggest one is the fact that the NFL expanding their season altogether, right, to 17 games over the course of 18 weeks. How significant is that extra week? We know that players are fatigued, especially towards the end of the season. We know that those final weeks could loom large in terms of those teams scrapping to get those last few playoff seeds. What do you think with that extra week?
I was anxious, honestly, Skylar, to see how the schedule would pan out. I just thought with another week, there'd be some dilution. And I thought that there might be some weeks where the schedule at the top level was a little thin. And I'm just now having a chance to kind of absorb it for the first time. I think it's our greatest schedule we've ever had. I'm shocked at how many good games we have consistently through all 18 weeks. Now, how it's going to play out for the teams and the personnel, that's to be seen. This is a real, in my mind, this was a big consideration that the NFL Players Association had to vote on, and it was a very close vote. It came down to basically 2 players per team across the league being in favor of it to make the difference. It was a thin margin that it passed. But I will say this, from the schedule standpoint, it certainly didn't weaken the CBS schedule. I think we've got the best season we've ever had. Shaping up with as far as the way the matchups are, the way the league doled out the matchups to us. My biggest thing going into the season that the fans are going to be back. I don't know, at what capacity. Is it going to be full level or not? I'm just thrilled to have games that are going to be played with that kind of excitement coming out of the arena. We just did a Super Bowl season. Now, of course, we had some fans at the Super Bowl, but it wasn't half filled. And I'm just thrilled to have the fans back. Now, whether or not it's going to lead to more injuries, I think we're going to have to see. This was a risky move, but the players voted on it. They had every chance to turn it down. They said for years they would never grant a 17th game, but they voted it through, and here we are. The things I concern myself more with is just on the broadcast side. I thought it might lead to some weaker weeks of scheduling. But I'm looking at it now, and I mean, we don't have a week that has a thin schedule by any means.
Right, I agree, and I just wanted to ask you a couple of things as we bounce around as we work with some of our affiliates. They had a few questions about some of the narratives. Particularly what the Kansas City Chiefs did in the offseason, beefed up their offensive line as they try to head back to a third Super Bowl. We talked about that week one matchup between the Steelers and the Bills. The Steelers have a lot to prove. The Bills, a lot to prove as well, if they can, prove that they are really the top dog in the AFC East now. And then I also was curious about what you thought about the Cleveland Browns. I know we talked about just the fact that, they're arguably one of the top 5 teams in the AFC. Odell is back, potentially healthier than we've seen him before, but they also have a lot to prove. Can they get into that next gear as well? They won a playoff game for the first time in a while. And can they get into that next step? Same thing goes for the Ravens, I guess you would say as well. What are some of the
let me take each of those individually.
Looking out for this season.
Okay, the Kansas City Chiefs knew off of the Super Bowl that they had to address their offensive line. They had massive issues. They got exposed in that game against the Buccaneers, and then they turned around and jettisoned several of the starters that they did have that had played for them. Most notably, Eric Fisher, the left tackle. But then they went out in the offseason. It was a complete rebuild. And what they have done is remarkable. I mean, they have upgraded that offensive line straight across, including through the draft, that should set them up for years to be able to protect Patrick Mahomes. We know his contract is set basically for the rest of his career. And they had to go find a way to protect him, and they have. And I think because of that, I think Kansas City, once again, is the clear-cut favorite in the AFC, and everything has to go through them, at least at this point. The Cleveland Browns went out in the offseason and they strengthened a roster that did not have many holes to begin with. I look at position groups and say, okay, offensive line, pretty good. Running back position, maybe the best in the league. Wide receivers, Odell's healthy. Jarvis Landry. The tight end position they addressed the previous year. I don't see a whole lot of holes there. Defensively, they went and added Jadeveon Clowney to go with Myles Garrett. Sensational. They went big in the draft, helping the secondary, and most notably the safety position. I did not see the Browns, as far as just building a roster, having tremendous weaknesses, but they went out and strengthened their roster in the offseason, and they should be able to back up what was a remarkable turnaround year and take another step this year. Now, you asked me about Pittsburgh.
The Ravens as well. A lot of pressure being put on Lamar Jackson, the former MVP. Mm-hmm. A lot of people saying, is he going to be worth the money? This is going to be one of those seasons where it's either put up or shut up for him in terms of winning a playoff game, in terms of taking that next step. We know he's an MVP level quarterback. Can the Ravens actually get to a Super Bowl with Lamar Jackson under center?
Of course they can get to a Super Bowl, and Lamar has done a whole lot of winning. That's all I know. I've had many of his games, and he's been dominant. And this whole thing about can he win a playoff game, unfortunately, that's something that can't be addressed until January. Meantime, they're going to go through a 17-game season, and they're going to have some performances, if it's anything like what the last couple of years will look like, where they are dominant and they're blowing people out, and he's unstoppable. And it's going to still come down to a game in January, and people are going to say, can he win a playoff game? Of course, they did win a playoff game this last year. They beat Tennessee on the road, but it's not the desired result that they want when you're talking about the Ravens and their proud history and what they've been able to accomplish. Are they going to be a factor? They're going to be a tremendous factor. They're a big part of our schedule. I mean, we've got the Ravens against Pittsburgh in Pittsburgh. It's a huge game. We got them in several other very key positions as we build our schedule for 2021. You kind of hedge it and you kind of bet on teams you think are going to be good. At least the league does when they hand off the schedule. And every indication is the expectation at the league level and at the CBS level is that Baltimore's going to be a huge factor again, and Lamar Jackson.
Jim, I appreciate it, brother.
Was there another team in there, Sky? I think you said Cleveland.
Well, we talked about the Browns. You hit it.
Okay.
Yeah, I was asking about with them. Josh Allen has a lot to back up, right? He had an MVP level season last year. I think, arguably could have won it. But they're back. They're doing great things. They seem like they have a solid team put together up there. And really, the AFC East is up for grabs, so to speak. Can New England kind of build that back? Are the Dolphins legit? They were, I think 10-6 last year. Can they give them a go there? I don't know what the Jets are doing, but are the Bills for real? And can they, repeat what they did last year?
I think that everybody in the league will tell you the Bills are totally for real. And Josh Allen doesn't have a whole lot to prove this year. That I don't believe in that discussion point that he has to prove that he's the real thing. I mean, he's just starting out on what's going to be, in my mind, a legendary career. I happened to see him last week. He was out here in my hometown and we played golf together. And if I was to tell you that I haven't seen a guy in May who's more focused on what's going to happen in September, October, November, December, and January, I've never seen anything like it. And Josh is a tremendous leader. And what he did last year, I believe, is just scratching the surface. And he's surrounded now by great coaching and a roster, again, that has been built to win. Once they got Stephon Diggs, that combination of Josh and Diggs, it was powerful. It's not going anywhere but up. They went out and got a couple of speed rushers to help the defense and put some pressure on quarterbacks in the offseason. Their first 2 picks in the draft, they addressed that. And I would have Buffalo right now. I know they were the AFC runner-up last year. I don't see any reason why they wouldn't go into this season in that position as the second favorite behind Kansas City.